to Kept Woman Conversations, where we take a deep dive into the captivating and complex world of my book, Kept Woman in the Grips of Obsession. Join us while we talk to real women, navigating their own stories, sharing their journeys with transparency, and showing us how they overcome their unique situations. Get ready to unlock the secrets behind the allure of being kept. Let's embark on this journey together. I have somewhere, there's Jessica Rodriguez, my guest today. And I want to introduce her as the eyebrow specialist here in Cleveland, Ohio. Woo! And also, not only is she a specialist in eyebrows and makeup, and she is a kept woman. Welcome, Jessica.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay. So I understand you had a chance to read the book. Oh my gosh.
Yes, 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 yes.
So what did you think? Tell me all about it.
I think that it is a good thing you're gonna write a second part to the book.
Uh-huh.
I feel like this was an introduction to you and how you became who you are today, how you're trying to maneuver through your healing process. I feel like there is more to the story with you and Herms. I really think that there's more there, just
Mm-hmm.
so that the readers could really understand why the stronghold and the love, has been there for so long. I feel like there's more to that story. I really do. I
Okay.
feel like you left us on a cliffhanger, but on a good one. A good one. And it's like, wait, that's it? Like, wait a minute, hold on. And I'm okay. She said there's going to be a to be continued. Okay,
Right,
that makes sense. That makes sense.
right. Okay. So in reading, did you see yourself in any of the situations or can you relate?
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Mhm.
Throughout the whole book, there were things that, it took me back. It took me back to relationships with friends, romantic relationships, with family. I feel like I would think to myself, oh, I could relate to that because I remember when I went through this or I went through that. So it was a very relatable book. Definitely,
Okay.
definitely.
Can you share a story with us with your ex-boyfriend,
My
your
daughter's father,
daughter's
yes.
father, where there was similar qualities of Hermes in the book, the narcissistic, controlling qualities that he had?
Um, there's so many. But I will say, I was able to gather through reading the book. I felt like in your situation, it was more so of a emotional abuse. There may have been some verbal, but I didn't get to that yet. But I'm really gathering. You already had some trauma before your romantic relationships, and then going into that specific relationship with him is where the emotional trauma and came in. And I feel like for me, in the way I can relate is I went through all parts of that. We're talking emotional, physical, verbal. Um, Definitely is still a narcissist to this day. Does he see it? No. Will he admit it? No. Many of them never do. Um, the controlling thing,
Mhm.
my way or no way, it's definitely relatable.
Isolation from
Definitely.
people, your friends and family.
Yes, I
Hmm.
definitely dealt with that a lot, especially because, in the beginning, no one knew of the physical abuse. So not only was I pulling myself away, to keep it from my loved ones, but he also wanted to isolate me, to the point where I really felt like all I had was him. I didn't have a daughter yet. This was years ago. I want to say I met him when I was 18. We're
Hmm.
talking off and on for about, let's see, maybe 9, 10 years. We do have a
Hmm.
daughter together. And even while not being together, it still has been toxic at times. Really, really has been.
So I find that when I used to go and do things, say if I want to go do yoga with my friends or something like that, and I would, get ready to go and getting everything together, and it was like, then he started to talk about my friends. So to get me to start
Mm-hmm.
thinking that something's wrong with them, and why would I want to go hang out with them?
Right.
And and I'm like, wait a minute, but don't you understand that I work all the time and I'm just getting a break. Yoga, that's it. That's all I'm going to do. It's not like I'm trying to go out to the club or something like that. So those types of things. I mean, I can't remember right now, some of the things that he used to say, but he used to just try to say all kind of horrible things about my friends and make it seem like something was wrong with me because I wanted to go do something that didn't have anything to do with
I can relate.
him.
I can definitely relate.
You relate to that?
I'm glad you had yoga because I had
Yeah.
nothing. But we're talking. You know, I decided to brush my hair today. I'm gonna go have sex with the wall.
Oh yeah, yeah,
It was
yeah.
horrible. It was horrible. It got to a point where I felt as I didn't have no friends. Not only did I push people away, but some that didn't know or understand what I was going through, they pulled themselves away. I had a lot of friends that I viewed as sisters that they turned their backs on me. They spoke bad about me, even being in similar situations. It was just like pointing the finger, and it's like, well, hold on. When you were in that situation, I wouldn't have done that to you. I would have tried to be there for you. So I felt very isolated, very alone at times, even
Mhm.
from my family. There was a time where many of my family did not want to talk to me. Again, they didn't understand what I was going through, although some of them may have had similar situations. But again, when I'm keeping so much from people, they don't know. They don't know the threats. The okay, you do this, you do that. I'm gonna. They didn't
Mhm.
know that. So not to make
Yeah.
excuses for them, but in some part, I can some if a part of me understands, and then another part is like, wow, I wouldn't have done
Yeah.
that to you. I think about my daughter, and I think, would I just completely cut her off? No, I wouldn't want to because people don't understand when you do that, it pushes a person closer to him or to her.
Mhm.
And in that situation, again, that's how I felt. Like, oh, this is it. This is all I have.
Right.
There's nothing else I can do.
Now I know your backstory, so I'm going to ask you this question: do you think that because you saw what you saw in your household, that made you more tolerable of what you were enduring with your ex, or did it
So
have any bearing on that relationship at all?
the crazy thing about it is, I always say this. I feel like when I was younger, I was smarter
Mhm.
because before all of that, I had friends or associates that were in those situations, and I would never call them stupid or judge them, but I would say, like, don't you love yourself enough? Don't you, like, self love is important. Like, why do you want to stay in that situation? Like, oh my God, I could never see myself in that situation. And then look what happened. So I
Yeah.
feel like in the beginning, growing up, I never want to be in that situation. I see how it affected my mom. We're talking, I can remember things as far as when I was 3 years old, in our household,
Mhm.
and that was with my father because my mom ended up marrying someone else and having two children with him. But with me and my sister's father, we definitely we seen a lot of things. I would remember hearing him putting his hands on her, seeing him put his hands on her. I would remember him
Mhm.
constantly breaking things in the house to the point where till this day, just to hear the sound of glass breaking, it just makes me cringe
Mhm.
because he was always breaking things in her house. And I feel like, again, being younger, oh, I'm never going to be in that situation, never. And then I got in that situation. You would have thought with the first smack, because that's how it started. First smack, I'm going to get out of the
Yeah.
situation. No. And then it escalates. There's the smack, the hair pulling. I'm going to yoke you up. And then next thing you know, here I am with black eyes, busted lips, and I'm
Mhm.
looking in the mirror like, then it's like you're in a situation where you're like, is it me? Did I do something? Like I went through all of
Yeah,
those
you start
motions, you
questioning.
know.
Yes, yes.
So
You
it
start
gets to
questioning
a point
yourself.
where it's like I feel like you have to go through the motions until you really get tired. You know, you first you love them, and you love and hate them, you fear them, then you're done. And it's like you go through all those motions, however
Yes,
your path is, but you will go through those motions until you say enough is enough. And I feel
yes.
like in my situation, it took too long for me to say enough is enough. It really
Yeah, I
did.
can relate
And
to that.
I still
It's
struggle with that.
definitely.
I still struggle with that. I still struggle with that. I'm still
Mhm.
like, I was supposed to leave a long time ago, you know, like, but that's what I did.
Yeah,
So,
it is what it is. Everybody's journey is different. But you know, in my work with through my with my trauma specialist, I essentially picked a man just like my dad, and that's the same thing that happened with you. What you saw, even though you didn't want that, you picked that anyway.
hmm hmm
Yeah. So go. So you got to get some hypnosis and figure out why, because I know why now on my end. But yeah, it's crazy. We essentially picked the same type of man.
it
Yep.
is crazy. I
Mhm.
will say though, you know, the difference between him and my father, definitely major difference because I didn't have a relationship with my dad growing up. So the last time I
Mhm.
seen him in person, I was 2 to 3 years old. Then you're talking all these years, no contact, no nothing. Had maybe
Mhm.
1 or 2 conversations with him when I was in the fourth grade on the phone.
Okay.
It was cry. I was scared. And it was crazy because growing up, I was really young saying I hated my father. And one thing I always respect about my mom is she never said, oh, don't say that, or oh, that's your dad. She always allowed my sister and me to have our feelings about him, you know, and
Okay.
she never talked bad about him. If we remember things, she would say, oh, yes, that's true. Or, but she let us have our own feelings. And I always respected that about her. So when my daughter was 2, I got in contact with him. He was in prison. We started writing letters to each other. And from the very first letter, I told him everything I remembered. And I said,
Mhm.
in order for, if we're going to, you know, start this relationship, I'm letting you know everything I remember. This is how I feel about it. You know, she has been mom and dad to me. And if you can't
Yes.
respect that, then, and his response, I was surprised, but it made me emotional. You know, I had a mix of feelings. He said he understood and he wanted to try this, and never
Okay.
once through all those years, because my dad has passed away. He passed away in 2023. Never one
Mm.
time did he blame my mom. Did he try to make an excuse? He admitted I was wrong. I
That's
did
good.
lie.
Yeah.
And I respect him so much for that. I always say he might have been who he was and who he wasn't, but in the end, I can say that he took accountability for what he did. And
That's
I feel
wonderful.
like it's gonna take a long time for my father, for my daughter's father to do that. But I can't say that my father did that, and you know I'm grateful for that. I'm really grateful for that. It showed a lot. You know, like yeah, he was older. He had been through so many things. We're talking. You know, he was also on drugs. You know, he was in the streets so young, and you know, and then you would be surprised because from what I'm told, his household was a very strict household. But then you start mingling with
Yeah.
certain people.
Yeah.
You know, rumor
Mhm.
is it started with some people in my family. They get in the streets, into drugs, into women, and then here my mom
There it
is the
is.
one suffering, and then they don't realize. So now there's children involved. They're enduring that as well. So we definitely
Mhm.
witnessed a lot of things, a lot of things.
You know, I find that I hope people don't get mad at me for saying this, but I find that Latino men are more controlling. You know, the culture is different. I find that they're more stringent when it comes to women. Do
I
you
will
do you
say
have that belief?
I will say with the Hispanic men that I experienced, yes. I will also say so. I'm not gonna say all of them. I'm not saying that. That's just like when
Of
people
course
say,
not.
"Oh,
Of course not.
all men need
Yeah.
shit." No, we're not saying that. I'm
Yeah.
saying with the
Yeah.
one I with the one I experienced and with the ones that I've seen in relationships with, you know, my loved ones or friends or whatever. I do see that a lot. But I do feel like it starts in the household. but not always, because there are some where in the household the mom was always respected, and they didn't see
Mm-hmm.
those things, and they still treat women like shit. But then you
Mm-hmm.
see it where you're like, your dad is like that, no wonder, like your dad is 60
Yeah,
years old and you're
exactly.
still treating your mom like that. That's where you get
Mhm.
it from,
Yeah.
and I just feel like as parents is very important for us to, especially when we know what's going on in the household. If your child needs to go see a therapist or whatever, like do that for your child, because now as adults, they look at the adults they turn into, So I just feel like now you have a son out here that's abusing women or mistreating women, or has trust issues with women. They think it's okay to treat women how his dad treated his mom. So I
Mm-hmm.
just, again, so a lot of the time it starts at home. It really does.
Yes. So, how has what you've been through impacted your self confidence, your self worth? How have you dealt with that?
I will say, for a very long time, I had very low self-esteem. I barely looked at myself in the mirror. I only looked at myself in the mirror just to make
Mm.
sure I brushed my teeth. I didn't have no boogers in my nose, nothing on my. That's it.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it was. I think it was the. I was. I. A part of me was ashamed of my situation. A part of me
Mm-hmm.
felt like it could never get better. I was sad. I was so depressed. And it did take me a long time to lift myself up. It really did. I always say, when I'm telling my story or someone is asking me certain things, just like when I told you, you asked me, you said,
Mm-hmm.
you want to come on the podcast? And I said, yes. And I said, had you asked me that some years ago, I would have said no. I said, but I don't live there anymore. I don't
Right.
I don't look at myself as a victim anymore. I feel like I'm not her anymore. It's a part of me, but I'm not her anymore. I've grown from that. I'm still growing from that. I'm still healing. I feel like a certain part of me, that there will always be some brokenness, but I can maneuver through it now.
Yes. So, have you sought any help for what you were going through? Have you seen a psychiatrist or
So
any groups, or how did you
I
deal with that?
did I did a few times, but it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
by choice. I'll be honest, it was actually court ordered.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that I did because there was some domestic violence situations with my daughter's father,
Yeah.
and it was court ordered. But the crazy thing about it is that you know I'm in a situation where he plays the victim. I look like the
Mm-hmm.
angry
They
one.
always do.
And the thing with that is that people don't realize it's so important to report these things. But I can understand when you're like, when I hear someone say, "Oh, I was with him this long and I never reported." I can understand that. I was there. I lived it. And
Mm-hmm.
so now it's like, okay, well, there's nothing documented. So
Yeah.
when I went to these sessions, I remember towards the end of one of them, well, both of them, but especially the second person I went to, she said, "You don't have anger issues." She said, "You went through a lot of trauma." And I looked at her and I was like, "Wow, I did." And then she was like, "Well, did you ever think that you were angry?" And I said, "I didn't think I was an angry person. I do feel like some things really, but I didn't never consider myself like,
Something's
oh, I'm
good.
just an angry person.
Yeah.
And that's how I was labeled. And
Yeah.
to hear it from a professional, someone who doesn't personally know me and isn't just telling me that, it make me feel good about myself. I was like, wow, like I realized when you go into those sessions, from when you sit down, they're reading you. She paid attention to
Mm-hmm.
how I held my bag, my body language, everything. And she was
Oh,
just
everything. They
reading
tell
me
you everything.
correctly. And I'm just
Mm-hmm.
like, and she was, I feel like you hold on to this because you don't like to let people in. And I'm thinking like, oh, she knows me. Like she knows me. So it was, I do feel like it was helpful. Do I
Mm-hmm.
recommend it? Of course. Do I feel like if I felt that I needed it again, would I do? Oh, definitely. Without it being required by the court, yes. I'm very grateful for both of them. One was a male, one was a female. I learned different things from both of them. I really did. Unfortunately, even going through those things, I still went through the situations I went through, but I never forgot what I learned from those sessions. I never did.
Yeah. So when did you realize, how did you wake up one day and said, I'm leaving, or how did that all come
So
about when you actually?
I want to say, I mean, there was a lot of back and forth. I was always, you gotta go, and oh, I would allow him to
In
come
your
back.
mind, it's like, go leave,
Oh yeah, they
wait.
always. But then I will say I have my mom's heart, her forgiving heart, and I
Mm-hmm.
I pity you. That pity for people. Oh, he doesn't have no
Yeah.
one. Oh,
All that. Yeah.
and I want to say that there was a lot of back and forth with it, but I will recall this one time where we were not no longer living together. This had been the longest time that we had been separated. And I had told
Mm-hmm.
myself, well, we weren't married, but I had told myself, I think this is it. And I will never forget that I woke up that morning, opened my eyes. First thing I did was look up at the ceiling, and I was like, I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna be okay. And I just had tears just coming down my face.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to start accepting, it was gonna be done. I knew it had to be done. So through all of that, he's moved on. I haven't moved on, but he's moved on. And I'm starting to say, okay, this is what it is. It was, of course it hurt it, because me looking at their situation is like, oh, he's treating her how I was supposed to be treated, or this is maybe it was me, so now I'm battling all these questions and feelings. And
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
so it got to a point where I became more comfortable with the fact that, okay, this is it, because throughout all of that, now I'm working on my self esteem. I'm trying to build myself up and accomplish my goals. And we did stay broken up for some time. He did go through some things, and I was there still. We're
Mm-hmm.
not together, still trying to, help him battle his demons.
Yeah.
And I want to say after that, he didn't live with me, but while I was trying to help him maneuver through his situation, he did come back to my house for some time. And quickly I saw like, no, this
No.
isn't
Right.
gonna work. And I'm
Mm.
I'm glad that I did, because by that time my daughter's getting older now. She's seeing these things.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that that's the part that I get upset with myself for, because I think to myself, I always felt like I had to help him. I had to help him. I'm like, no, I didn't. I did not have to. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter that I had a child with him. I didn't know him anything. And it's like a small part of me felt like I did. And I had to learn like, no, I don't.
That's
Then
that forgiving heart.
exactly. And then I had to keep learning, like, I have a daughter. What example am I setting for her? Like, what am I doing? And it's to a point where, she's 14 years old now. And now she's asking more questions. She's being more
Mm-hmm.
verbal about what she remembers. And it's to a point where now I'm even more honest with her. I want to say a couple years ago, she would ask me, like, um, did daddy hit you? And I would find a way to go around that question and not
Mm-hmm.
answer.
Yeah.
And then I kept saying she's getting older. She knows I need to be honest with her. And then I read somewhere, and it really like smacked me in the face. I read somewhere that it said, you have to be honest with your emotions, because if with your children, because if you're not, how are they going to trust their own emotions? And I was like,
Mm.
wow. So it got to a point where I told myself, next time she asks me, I have to tell her. And she did. We were watching a movie. I forgot the name of the movie. It's a movie with Nia Long, and she goes missing, and the daughter is looking for her. And there's a twist at the end of the movie that reveals that the mom was, in that type of relationship. So she asks
Mm-hmm.
me, and I look at her, and she just says, mommy, were you in a domestic violence relationship with daddy? And I just looked at her and I said, yes. And the look on her face, it was like I felt like
Mm.
she always knew, but she needed to hear me say it.
Hear you say, yeah.
And I was just like, wow, like I can't believe that I stayed as long as I did. And, and I know that she
Mm-hmm.
remembers some things. And, her dad is incarcerated now.
Okay.
She'll be 16 and a half when he's released. Um,
Okay.
so that means
Do they have
by
any
then he will
contact?
be about 8 years. They do.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, no. I do
Okay.
believe in my daughter setting healthy boundaries, and
Okay.
I am showing her, regardless of who it is, if you feel that that relationship isn't good for you, it's good to take a step back and say,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to communicate with you right now. And that's what she's doing right now. And, I'm fine with it. She's not being disrespectful, but, again, I think it's important for us to show our kids it's okay to set those healthy boundaries. It's definitely okay. I don't believe in the whole, oh, that's still this. No, no. If it's unhealthy, then it's okay for her
Yeah.
to remove herself from that situation. So,
So, as I stated in the intro, I said that you're a kept woman, and you
mhm.
are, because as you were going through all of this physical abuse, emotional, mental, God was keeping you. He made sure nothing happened to you. He could have done something to you to unalive you.
Right, right.
They lose their minds and go into this, uh I don't know, to another world, and then they come back later. And
Hmm.
so he could have done something to you that unalived you, and he kept you. He kept you together, kept
He
you
did.
together for your daughter,
God is good.
kept
Yes,
you,
he did.
I mean, to some degree where you can still take care of yourself, where you moved out, and where you were thinking about, should I leave, should I stay, giving you the avenue unto which you did leave, where you had your own place, and still to this day, who you are now. Because if somebody looked at you now, they would say you haven't been through anything.
Right.
But he kept.
I I definitely agree. I definitely agree.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing about it is, in your book, I'm
Hmm.
like, wow, at least she experienced that. It was always my place.
Hmm.
I was always the one working, consistently providing. So I never got to experience that with him where when I felt that I owed him, it wasn't because he provided or I think it
Hmm.
was it was a mix of things, like I thought about when my family wasn't talking to me, when I didn't have anyone, I have a daughter with him. It was that part. But it was
Yeah.
nothing else like, oh, he was a provider, he was this. No. But then I look back on it and I struggle with it because I tell myself all those years, and because of those years, you missed out on so much.
Hmm.
There was so much you were supposed to accomplish that you didn't. And
Hmm.
I feel like I get mad at myself because I'm like, I could have did this, I could have did that. When it
Oh
comes
yeah.
down to my daughter, I feel like I was meant to have her. Definitely, I definitely was. I feel like if it wasn't for her, I would have never really got the courage to say like I need to do better. Although it took me a long time, but I feel like I needed that love from her. I needed that daughter's love. Um, Again, I just encourage anyone who's in that situation, whether it's the beginning or they've been in that situation for a while, it's like when you see that chance to go, just go. Because again, it turns from a smack to the pulling hair, and when you're saying like, oh, he could have unalived you, oh, definitely. I definitely remember times where I was literally fighting for my life. And I have scars still, that I look at them now and I'm like, wow, this is part of my past now. Again, we're talking having black eyes, broken foot, crooked finger, scars. Like, it's just so much that I went through. And I just tell myself, like, I'm not that person anymore. But although I'm not that person anymore, I still get mad at myself that I stayed as long as I did because I was not supposed to stay that long.
Well, everything happens for a reason, and that was your journey, good or bad. So I ask you, what is being kept mean to you, though? I know what I can see and what the world sees. What does it mean to you?
So, if you were to ask me that before me reading this book, I would have said as far as what? Because the normal person, you may say, oh, she's a cat woman, and they may think, oh, well, she's taken care of by her man, or something of that sort, or it may be, oh, he has her, he's controlling, he runs her life, or like you stated, when it comes to, we're talking about God. And I feel like for me, I do feel like when it came down to that part with God, definitely, I am here because of God. Do I feel like I was also a kept woman as far as the relationship, the toxic relationship I was in? Definitely. I was controlled. But again, I do feel like when you talk about a kept woman, there's more than one definition to that. And I feel like depending on a person's personal experiences, their response is definitely going to be different.
Yes. Well, I've had such a great talk with you today. I'm so glad. We gotta finish this conversation.
Yes, yeah, we need to do a
I
part
got some,
two.
I got some
Because
resources for
let me
you,
tell you, my story is long. My story is long. So
but I got some resources for you to get over that anger and to get over that. Why did I stay so long? Because we don't want that to hold you back from anything. Still thinking about that.
I feel like when it
People want
comes
to know
down
that
to
things
that,
hold you back. Huh?
right, but I feel like it's like bittersweet. There's the good and the bad to that because it gives me that push. I want more. I think about, okay, well, I didn't do this, I didn't get to experience that, but then now I'm like, oh, I'm doing it now. Like
Right.
now it's like I want to accomplish all
At
these
the
things
right
because
time, also. You weren't ready before.
right, because I
You
keep
weren't
telling
ready
myself
before.
like, okay, so let's say
Yeah.
at that time I would have went back to school like I was supposed to. You know,
Hmm.
I was in working all these days. I couldn't go in there all bruised and black dirt. So I think about things like that. But so there's times, and I am a believer. Everything happens for a reason, whether we know it or not. You know,
Yes.
everything has a
Good
reason,
and
and I
bad.
just feel
Good and bad.
like but I just feel like sometimes as a human, I'm like, I know I say that, but still. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've had a great time talking to you today.
thank you.
And I want to leave everybody with this. I'm A.R. Boyd of Kept Woman. I want you to tell your story. Don't keep it in. Don't keep it bottled up like we're taught to bottle it up and keep it moving. Because when all of that comes out, it comes out bad. And it creates trauma and disease and all kinds of things. So, for more information about that, see the description below. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and comment. Goodbye for now. Until the next episode.